Hello to everybody out in the automobile world. This is Mike Musto, and welcome to another episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ podcast. This is our all Dodge Daytona episode, and specifically 1969 Dodge Daytona episode. So if you follow along on social media or on the websites and things like that, you will know that I have a 1969 Dodge Daytona tribute car that has been shipped out to Wesley Motorsports in Lansing, Michigan to get completely redone. Now, on this episode, we're going to bring Kevin Wesley in. He's the gentleman that's building the car from Wesley Motorsports to explain what we're going to do with it. Because when we posted some pictures, let's just say the audience got a little mad at me, right? So we're going to get into that in a moment or two. But before we do that, we decided to pull a car from our very own Hemmings classified section, of which we have 25 to 30,000 cars online and in print at any given time, along with our Hemmings auction. Now, the car we have chosen is an all-original 1969 Dodge Daytona, Charger Daytona, I should say. 440 car with an original 4-speed, which is kind of what my car looks like now, except this one's silver and mine happens to be black. But mine is a 5-speed where this is a 4-speed, and mine is a tribute where this one is real. So with that being said, give us about 2-3 seconds. We're going to be right back with Kevin Wesley from Wesley Motorsports, and we're going to talk about how one goes about putting a brand new modern driveline in a very, very old supercar. Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Mike Musto, and we are back with Kevin Wesley from Wesley Motorsports to talk about the Daytona project. So this is Project ANGRIER 2.0. This is my 1969 Dodge Daytona tribute that we built back in 2006, and that Kevin has bravely undertook the project of moving it into the 21st century. Kevin, how you doing, man?
Good, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. Still a little tired, but doing okay. I'm still getting caffeinated, but it's all good. So to give everybody an idea, about a month ago, the Daytona was actually shipped from San Francisco, California, out to Lansing, Michigan, to Kevin's shop. And I had gone out to Lansing last week, and and this was Kevin's first real experience with the car. He got to drive it. He got to see it. He got to tell me how crappy it was or how good it was. And basically just kind of go over the car for the build. So I guess let's talk about, Kevin, what the car is now and then where we wanted it to be. So again, people, this car started off as a 1969 Dodge Charger SE. It has currently a 471 low deck stroker in it, 5-speed manual. We used parts from an original SRT Challenger and a Dodge Viper when we built it for the braking system, but everything else is pretty much stock. Is that pretty much your assessment of what you saw and drove when we got out there, Kevin?
Yeah, I would say it's a classic mid-2000s, late 2000s build. I mean, it's just, kind of textbook, right? From what was going on at that time. And you were the lead on some of that stuff, like with the brake kit and things like that. But yeah, I mean, low deck stroker with a 5-speed. I mean, it's a good combo.
Yeah, and that's, when we built it, it was interesting because we tried to keep as many Dodge parts as we possibly could on this car from the factory. And back in 06, that the SRT Challengers and Chargers were just coming out. And so that we used the rotors off a Challenger, we used the brakes off a Viper. The wheels were custom one-offs, and that was before anybody was even doing custom one-off wheels. Then there's the matte black paint, which people love or they hate. There's a lot. This is like I love it or I hope it burns to the ground type of car for a lot of people.
Well, I hope it doesn't burn to the ground, but I mean, I actually like the matte paint with the gloss stripe. I mean, it's a good combo. I mean, it's, those things are very basic. And I mean, what you've done with it is, again, 98% of the quote pro touring resto mod cars are essentially built pretty much the same way. I mean, firm feel Hotchkiss, all those people have made, last 15 years. That's what they've sold. That's what they've built. That's what we built. I mean, we had the autocross taxi, a few years ago, and that's exactly what it was. And it's an absolutely a great combo and StoneAxe reliable, which is exactly what we want your new version to be.
Yeah. So speaking of the new version, Kevin, you must have been like the third or fourth episode that we did of the podcast when we first started back in September. And I wanted to bring Kevin back on again because since that time he's run the Pikes Peak Challenger. He is literally, Wesley Motorsports is the one of, if not the only company that's really retrofitting these Challengers to become really hardcore serious performance machines. Not that they aren't already, but really taking them to the next level in terms of handling, in terms of braking, in terms of changing the public's opinion of what these cars are absolutely capable of by running in, like I said, Pikes and Trans Am and everything else. So, you know,
they're absolutely not a boat. I love the boat connotation. I mean, we just absolutely always have to deal with it. It's funny because, when you look at a Camaro, great, the latest generation Camaro is definitely lighter, but a GT 500 is not small. I don't know why everybody says, oh, the Challenger's so heavy. And it's like, what is it? 100 pounds different depending on which version you get. But I mean, that Scat Pack, that white Challenger that's in our shop, I mean, we can have that down to 3,900 pounds and still have full interior in it. So yeah, it's a couple 100 pounds heavier than a Camaro. I get it. But I always say, Dodge did a great thing with that platform because it's been now we're going on 14 years.
Yeah.
Single platform, no retool. I mean, who's printing cash? It's not Ford and Chevrolet.
Right. I think that's such a valid point. And I always kind of equate it, and people always get mad at me when I do this, is that if you look at cars like the Porsche 911, that car has been an evolution since the mid 60s. And that's really what the Challenger has been over the last 14 years. So if you were to take a first gen SRT8 Challenger and put it against a modern Redeye, you can't even compare the two. There's so much stuff that's been done to those cars over the last 14 years.
Yeah, so much stuff that's been done over the years, but they absolutely still. Oh yeah, I still have a job. It's still ringing back there. It absolutely still, you can take that stuff and bolt it on, from anything from the modern Redeye back to 2006 or 2008. So,
yeah,
we're actually going to do that in an upcoming article that we're going to have on the website and the blog and all that fun stuff is just, how to take your '08 Challenger, how to take your Charger back to '05 and retrofit with all the late model 6-piston stuff for brakes and things like that. I mean, it's just so easy to update those cars.
Yeah, and I think that's, there are so many of them out on the road over the last 14 years that now people are really starting. I mean, if you can buy a used first gen SRT8 Challenger, that is just an outstanding deal, right? For the power.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now that you're offering brake kits and suspension mods and stuff like that, people can really take these to the next mod. And what I like about it is that since the platform has been there for so long, you can now get a younger generation into a really modern feeling car and a modern looking car for not that much money. And then they can improve upon it as they wish.
Right. And that's what's great about being able to bolt on all the current generation parts. I mean, when it comes to suspension pieces, it's an absolute swap. I mean, it gets to be a little bit nuanced on a few bits, but if I want to take a cradle and update my '08 Challenger and get rid of the rear diff that's in there, what is it, the Getrag or whatever it is, and put a ZF in it, you can absolutely do that. You just, unbolt the cradle, bolt it up, put a new drive shaft in the car, and away you go. So, I mean, those things are nice, and it just becomes easy. I mean, the Challenger is selling more than it's ever sold. It's not like those cars aren't going to be obtainable for people 10 years from now. It's going to become the next great used car. I mean, think about the blower cars. I mean, you look at a 2016 Challenger. I mean, 2026, 2027, that's going to be a great used car.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. I mean, just the power and the performance. So let's turn and talk about the Daytona for a second. So the whole goal when we started this build, and this whole idea has been going on for at least in my head for 5 or 6 years, and then Kevin and I started talking a few years ago, and then Dodge and MOPAR got involved, and it has been this kind of evolutionary thing. And one of the things that Kevin and I started talking about was the drivability of the car, because if anybody knows this car and they know me, they know that all my stuff gets driven anytime, anywhere, under any conditions. As you can see, there's a photo up there, and the car is covered in road salt, which apparently broke the internet when I posted a picture up, because people thought that because I drove it in the salt in Michigan for a day, that the car was just going to immediately fall apart and rot into the pavement. And people forget that I grew up on the East Coast. I am New York born and bred. I grew up in the salt. I grew up in the snow. This car was in the snow for years before it ever came to California, and now it's in Michigan. So, like, people, this is why you have water. It's called a hose. It's called a pressure washer. Like, get off the whole high horse thing. Get off my back about driving my car the way that I wanted to. And if you want to keep your car in the garage and do nothing with it, have at it. I'm all for it. You're not me. You're not Kevin. This car is meant to be driven anytime, anywhere, and that's what we're going to do with it going forward.
I mean, what body panel can't you buy for that car currently? I mean, AMD, I think, makes what? Every single panel
Everything.
for that car, including the roof. I mean, so what? I mean, it's not like it's going to just rust into the ground and disappear. So drive the thing. Hell, drive it all year round. Take it through the frickin' car wash like a modern car. And if it gets rusty, like a modern car is going to, just have the quarters replaced. It's not brain surgery.
Yeah, I think that people forget that. And I have a, people think that once you build the car and you complete it, that it has to be done and stay in that form forever. So, like this thing is, if you look at the nose has rock chips on it and there's got some bubbles here and there.
As it
like,
should.
It's a driver. And I really want to impress upon people that as opposed to coming out of the woodwork and saying, I can't believe you did that, you're going to ruin your car. How about looking at what you have or don't have, more importantly, in your garage and going, if I get something, I'm going to enjoy it. Like, why are you going to save it for the next owner? That just boggles my mind. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's one of the reasons that, the car is actually at Wesley Motorsports now, because like for the last, 15 years, we've driven the car in its current configuration and it's been great, but it's time. I mean, we've done 60,000 plus miles in the car. The suspension is now old. It's time for an update. And back in 06, the technology wasn't really there to do it. And now Kevin is the guy that actually made this plan to put in a Redeye engine, right? The Redeye mill. Yep. We're going to do the 8-speed ZF transmission, the Torque Flight ZF. We're going to do suspension, but we're also going to keep it relatively, I want to say, stockish. So, Kevin, do me a favor and just go through that for those who are listening.
Well, I mean, the simple thing is we're not going to cut the front end off of the car and we're not going to back half it. So it's still going to be torsion bars and it's still going to be leaf springs. There's no reason. Okay, the packaging has been sorted out. Gen 3 Hemi with a blower will bolt into that car. You'll be able to close the hood. If we can't, we'll figure it out. I mean, if that means we need to tweak the mounts a little bit, so be it. But, the beauty of these, just like an LS swap, I mean, at some point, everybody develops the swap parts. So Holley is doing a great job with pans and mounts and all those pieces, all the little pieces that we're going to need to make, to get that car to fit, or to get that engine to fit well in the car. So again, we're not reinventing anything. The 8-speed swaps have been done many times. The controllers are available. Granted, not every single piece is available at the MOPAR parts counter, but that's okay. I mean, there's definitely some good aftermarket suppliers out there like Holley that make quality parts, and that's what we're going to utilize. But starting with an OE drivetrain, I mean, you can't beat it. I mean, 800 horsepower at the flick of a key. I mean, how much better does it get?
Yeah, and I think that's, Kevin and I have had discussions with a bunch of individuals, when we first started saying we were going to do this. And it's very interesting where people are going to go, well, what brakes are you going to use? And what this are you going to use? And what that are you going to use? And we always go back to, we're going to use pretty much stock components, right? So, we're going to use, again, these were Dodge Viper calipers back in the day. We're going to use modern Viper, the 6-piston calipers. And Kevin, why are we doing that?
Because they work and they'll last 100,000 miles and we don't have to touch them.
See, and like, I don't know why that when you say that to people, they get annoyed. They're like, well, why don't you run this company's brakes? And why don't you run this company's suspension? It's like, you have an OEM that literally spent millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of dollars testing this stuff under every condition imaginable.
It's a Brembo caliper. How much better can it get? I mean, this is a street car. We want a DOT caliper that still has seals. We want a DOT brake line that still seals. And, you start with an OEM caliper. All that stuff has been done. We don't have to worry about it. And for the price, I mean, it's an OEM Brembo caliper that you can get from any Dodge dealer for about $600 a piece. I don't know. That's, $1,200 worth of brake calipers on the front that have titanium pistons. I mean, come on, you can't even get an aftermarket caliper like that for that price.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And like, yes, this happens to be a Dodge build and a Mopar build, but understand that this goes with any build that you're doing, regardless of the manufacturer, right? So I think
Yeah,
so many times people say, well, I must have this and I must have that. And they end up ruining what could have been an otherwise amazing build by listening to those on the internet, by not doing their due diligence in their research. And ultimately, their build track kind of spirals out of control to where they're building something that the internet really wants, but that they don't particularly want at day's end.
Well, I mean, here's a brain buster, right? I mean, there's so many. I mean, what is there? Half a dozen coilover conversion kits available for these cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I have yet to go to an event where a coilover car beats a torsion bar car. It's as simple as that. And when you say, okay, well, even if I can get a coilover car to be faster than my torsion bar car, for what cost? I mean, some of the kits are economical, but some of the kits are just ridiculous. So again, bang for the buck. I'm all about bang for the buck. Same as you, right? We want to spend reasonable money, get good performance. Yes, we can go to the infinite last level if we wanted to, but it's still a street car. It's still a street car that we want to take to track days. Okay, that's just like a production car, whether it be a Challenger SRT8, whether it be a ZL1 Camaro or a GT500 Mustang. All of those cars are built under that same premise. They are not all out, flat out race cars. It's a street car that you can still take to the track. And that's what you want.
Yeah. And I think that's, that goes back to people's kind of build tracks getting offline, right? And I mean, I get PM'd, DM'd all the time of people going, this is what I want to build this car, blah, 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 blah. My first question is, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to drive it as a daily? Are you going to use it are you going to go to the track once every 3 months with it, right? Are you going to take it to the supermarket? Do you live in a city? And this goes back to when Kevin and I first started talking. That's the question he asked me. What are you going to do with it? Right? Well, it has to
absolutely.
Right? It has to be a car first, and do all types of really fun car stuff, like sit in traffic. That's not fun, but like that's the fact of owning a car. You're going to sit in traffic at some point. It's going to be 100 degrees out, if you live in anywhere with that type of climate. So it can't overheat. It has to be comfortable. It has to be normal. Now, granted, when you look at it, a Daytona in and of itself is a ridiculous looking machine. It just is. But it gets a lot better when it's comfortable and it runs right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, I like to build vintage 4-door cars because they're cheap. I mean, all the same stuff still bolts on the 4-door, just like it bolts on the 2-door. It's not going to be as eye catchy as a Daytona with the nose and the wing and people's jaws dropping when we're cruising around in the snow is just unbelievable. But I mean, it gets the job done. And if you can bolt the same stuff on a 4-door, why not? As long as you get the enjoyment, as long as the car is still a driver like you want, or does whatever mission that you've set in front of it. But absolutely, when it comes to idling in traffic and cruising cross country and, being able to cross Nebraska at 75 or 80 miles an hour, or whatever the speed limit is these days, you absolutely want to just have it work. And that's where the OEM stuff just beats everybody else. And that's why we want to start with an OEM drivetrain.
So when Wesley Motorsports started building cars, when you first started racing and started building cars, did you look at everything else that the aftermarket was doing and say, oh, I need this stuff? And have you tried a bunch of their stuff and then ultimately went back to why did I do this?
Absolutely. I mean, my history is absolutely, especially when it comes to Mopar, when I got started running one lap, it was OEM. OEM. And the guys that we would race against, they would have all the aftermarket parts and the cool brake kits and this. And we would either beat them or be so close that it didn't matter. So when you see something like that, you ask yourself, why am I spending all this money on these extra bits? I mean, again, racing has its place for high-end race parts. We all know that, right? But when it comes to certain things like what we're doing and what you're doing, when you still have to cross the country, aftermarket race parts aren't where it's at. They don't have the durability. I mean, you don't want to be zigzagging the country, which I've seen, and break a rocker arm. I mean, you take, back in those days, what was it? The SB2 Chevy or whatever cup motor flavor of the day. And, you break an aluminum rocker when you're 1,000 miles from home. Guess what happens? You're done.
Right.
Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, now with the technology that's out there, right? It's not, we talk about the Redeye mill going in at 800 horsepower. This isn't 15 years ago. We're building an 800 horsepower big block.
Right.
Would really result in an undrivable car.
Right.
It's just, the technology has moved on such, and I think it's an amazing time because now we're at that precipice where how much longer are these mills going to be around that produce this much power on petrol and, as opposed to kind of going EV swaps. And I'm not against EV swaps in any way, shape, or form. It's just, and I was kind of having this conversation the other day with a buddy where, like, picture the Daytona videos that we shot, and we'll put one up, of the burnout.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, burnouts are always great, but burnouts are better when they're sound. Right. So I think that, it's just something for people to consider, like, because we hear a lot about EV swaps and older cars and stuff. And again, no real issue with it, except the lack of bravado and the lack of theater. And I think when you have a vehicle like the Challengers or the Camaros or the Mustangs or the Chargers, that is so much a part of the personality of what that vehicle is. It's like if you've ever watched a Formula E race.
Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Unfortunately, it's like all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're watching full-size RC cars go around a track and you're like, all right, it was cool for like the first lap.
Well, I mean, we experience it at Pikes. I mean, we see a lot of electric cars at Pikes. Obviously, the Volkswagen, when it showed up in, 2018 and set the record, that was electric. And they're honestly just boring. I mean, they're so quiet that, they have this buzzer and you can hear the buzzer a half a mile away or whatever the, siren is coming up the mountain.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's just not the same. Granted, yeah, they're fast. There's no doubt about it. They are fast. I mean, I'm looking forward to doing a swap in a Challenger where you can put a little tiny turbo 4-cylinder in the front and a battery pack in the rear and get the weight balance squared away in that car.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be something that's actually absolutely going to be cool. But yeah, I mean, the feeling, the sound, everything with with a petrol engine, you can't beat it. I mean, I tell everybody I am all for an autonomous car that I can set my butt in and I can work on my way to the office. All about it. But when I want to knock down 15 or 17 hours and drive straight through to Florida or Georgia or Texas or Colorado or whatever, give me a gas car because I want to stop for my 10-minute rest stops and just keep going. I don't want to stop for an hour or 2 hours or whatever it might be. And I'm sure those things are going to get better, but not everybody drives the same. So hopefully they don't pigeonhole us into that same hole.
Yeah, it was interesting. Last week we had John Volker on, and John is an EV expert. And what was very interesting was the comment section that we had where people were kind of just pounding this poor guy into the ground because like they were like, and we had a wonderful conversation on kind of the future of mobility and where EVs are going to go and so on and so forth. And for me, as somebody who's not a quote unquote EV guy, it was just very educational, and it was of where stuff is going. But I always ask the question at the end, anytime I talk to anybody with an EV, and I say, okay, well, that's great. I understand you have it, but what's really in the garage? And then all of a sudden it comes out. I have two Morris Minors and I've got a Sunbeam Tiger and I have this, right? Because these are vehicles that make you feel a certain way in very much the same vein as the Daytona does, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about the passion, right? what really brings you the passion, and especially with the older cars, you know, there's always passion around those. But the late model stuff, I mean, the Challengers and the Chargers, there's definitely passion for those, and they're so easy. I mean, I remember the first time I bought a 5.7 2013 Challenger, and I basically kicked myself and I said, why did you wait so long? And it was just
Right.
so easy, you know, burnouts and just having fun just all immediately came back, which had been missing for so long. And, you know, and you just walk out to the garage and hit the key. And if you have a problem, you take it to the dealer, whatever it might be, or, you know, heaven forbid, work on it yourself, which they aren't that difficult to work on.
So, are you excited about doing like these retro style builds now moving forward for Wesley Motorsports? Because obviously you do, you know, the new Challenger race stuff and Charger race stuff, and you sell a bunch of kits to retrofit and make those cars better. But doing the swaps in a car like the Daytona, is that something that you're excited about modernizing these things and taking them to the next level?
Oh, absolutely. Because, you know, just like, you know, we're talking about doing with your car, you know, getting a modern drivetrain just makes the drive and the experience just so much better. I mean, I have a 76 Dart Light that I built, you know, you saw it at the shop, you know,
Oh
and I
yeah.
built it several years ago, and it's a 6.4 Gen 3 Hemi, completely bone stock, you know, drop it in, still has active intake. Yeah, it has headers. Sure, it has no cats, but I mean, that car makes 550 all day long. I mean, and you just hit the key and away you go. So those swaps are absolutely what we want to do because they're simple, right? And people like Holley and everybody else have made those swaps so easy. It's just why would you really do anything else? Now, sure, you can sit down and I've been there, I've done it and said, you know, every nut and bolt, every dollar and cent, can you still build a carb car cheaper? Absolutely you can. And that's fine. And if you're on a
Yeah.
budget, absolutely. But you know what? I would rather start with a 5.7 and drop an intake and a carb and an ignition system on it than starting with an LA motor, just because it's easier and it already has aluminum heads and it already has a hot cam and it already makes, you know, 400 horsepower.
Yeah.
Ironhead 340s didn't make 400 horsepower from the factory.
Right.
It just didn't. Okay.
Right. Well, that's, I think, you know, that goes to one of the reasons that the LS swaps were so popular, right? And continue to
Yeah.
be, because
Yep.
you can go pull a 5.3 or a 6.2 or a 6.0 out of anything
Right.
and basically put it in anything. And all of a sudden you have, you know, great reliable power that runs on pump gas in any weather, any place. And, you know, it's interesting. I have the Daytona, but then I also have my 68 Charger. I'm fortunate enough to be able to have both. And my 68 is an old school Ironhead 440 big block with a carburetor on it, right? And, you know, I hadn't driven in a while, and I took it out on Sunday because Hemmings had a show, and it's it feels old because it is, right? You're talking 65, 70-year-old technology, but there's still a very romantic part to that car, right?
It's romantic, but you still don't want to be the guy with vapor lock when you go to leave the show.
No, you don't. And like, you don't want to be the guy, like when you get to the show, you turn it off and then it diesels for like 7 minutes and everybody's looking at you like, dude, your car's broken. Right. So
Yeah.
there's so much that, you know, and I've always said this, I'm like, that car will always stay a big block and a carburetor just for nostalgia reasons. Right.
Yeah.
But I could tell you that when it comes time for the road trips, and I've driven that car across the country multiple times, I'm so looking forward to what the Daytona is going to become because of the reliability, because of the ease of use, right? It- I think it's that ease of use thing. Just
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it completely is the ease of use. You can drive it anywhere, right? I mean,
yeah,
you can drive it anywhere. You're not gonna have to worry about it, and it's gonna start every time you hit the key. Um, you know, I've been there. I mean, I've driven zigzag the country in carb cars before. Switched to fuel injection, and your life just becomes infinitely easier.
hmm
Okay, well, that's the evolution of technology. You know, it's just like you driving your car in the snow. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's an uproar." You know, you can't drive it in the snow, and it's like, what do you think they did in 1969? what do you think they did in 1970? You know, I talked to my father. He's like, yeah, my 69 Swinger 344 speed, I put snow tires on it and I drove to
Oh,
work. I
yeah.
mean, that's exactly what they did. It's not like that. It didn't magically happen and everybody put them in the garage. And even then, what else did you have to drive? It's not like you went out and got your
Yeah.
all-wheel drive SUV and went to the office or the plant or wherever it was. You drove the rear wheel drive V8 because
Oh,
that's
yeah.
really all there was.
Oh, yeah. And that's,
So
listen, everybody that's got a Challenger now that lives in Michigan or a Charger now that lives in Michigan is driving in the snow.
yeah, I mean, if that's your car, absolutely. I mean, when I got my 2013 the first time, I absolutely went out and I got, you know, Pirelli winter tires for it and another set of wheels, and it was a blast in the snow. I mean, I took it ice racing multiple times. And, you know, why not? It's fun.
Right.
And yeah, it sucks when you drive down a gravel road or in my, you know, drive down my driveway when it's muddy in the spring and you hate
Sure.
it. But, you know, that's what they make power washers for.
Yeah. And I think that always goes back to, for some reason, people have this idea that it's frowned upon. And I think people care more about what other people think about them driving their cars. Like, you know, again, we had posted it on Instagram, and it's over 100,000 impressions. And I have to say, the majority of the comments were very positive. But then you do get these comments, and they're very adamant that you're just an asshole. You know
Oh,
what I mean? I
fine.
can't
So
believe
what?
you. If I had that, it would never come out, and blah 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 blah. And this is my opinion. And then they get even more annoyed when you type back and you go, I don't care about your opinion because it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. Right? So, and it's not to take away, it's just, and I love the fact that people are that passionate. I do love that people are that passionate. They're that concerned about keeping these cars preserved. But I think they also have to remember, going back to what you said, Kevin, everything's available now. You can buy
You can
every
build
panel.
that car 10 times over. Well, it's just like, I
Right.
mean, think about a, you know, a Hemi e-body, right? Like a Cuda or a, you know, everybody
Mm-hmm.
talks about the unobtainium, the, you know, 71 Cuda convertible, you know, Hemi car. It is so much easier and so much cheaper to restore that car than it is to buy it the first time.
Oh
I mean, you
yeah.
think about what you pay for some of those cars when it comes down to essentially you're buying a data plate and a VIN tag, but
Mm-hmm.
restoring that car, I mean, yeah, out of reach of normal people like me. I mean, I can't afford to restore that car, but certainly everything's available. I mean,
Yeah.
I always laugh when people talk about, you know, especially resto cars. Well, that isn't the way it came down the assembly line. And my answer is, who was working that day? Because you have no idea the way that car came down the assembly line.
That's right.
And one of the best things that I've seen is a buddy of mine literally had a lunchbox from his uncle that worked at the plant, and it had a VIN tag with his name stamped in it. And it's like, if I can go and have the lady that's cutting the VIN tags today cut me one with my name in it and use the original Mopar rivets to make my lunchbox name tag, anything is going to happen in that plant.
That's right.
Okay. That's just the way it is. Anything is going to happen on any given day. And you have no idea how that car came off the assembly line.
I think that's absolutely correct. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of the fun of diving into the history of these things. And, you know, and the other part of it is, you know, we talk about cost of these things, right? And we
Yeah.
talk about trying to be as economical as you can. And like when we did this car years ago, yes, it cost a decent amount of money, but we also tried to be economical because I didn't have that much money to throw at it. And it was,
Right.
you know, the amount of money that's in this car right now is less than a new 911,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So when people say, you know, well, I don't understand, you know, I can't afford this, I can't afford that. I'm like, well, you're driving a Cayman or a 911 or whatever the case is. You
Right.
can absolutely afford it if that's your, you know, what you're kind of looking at it from a price point. You just choose not to, right? You choose to spend your money on that as opposed to this,
Yeah.
right?
And that's one of the things that unfortunately, you know, the Challenger market hasn't embraced as much as the Mustang and the Camaro market as far as, you know, dealer add-ons, right? I mean, you know, I still miss the idea or the chance to go to the Dodge dealer and say, yeah, I want a Scat Pack Challenger with, these brakes and these seats and this piece and
Yeah.
that piece, from some choice aftermarket places, very much like a Shelby Mustang or, whichever dealer flavor of the day for a Camaro that's offering these kits. I mean, there's a couple that are doing it, but not really high performance. And generally it's all focused on drag racing, which, okay, I get it. But yeah, I mean, sometimes they're unobtainable because people just can't stroke the check. But if you start small and you sock into, that what your payment on that Cayman would be, man, you're gonna have a
Yeah.
really good car. You're gonna have a really
Yeah.
good car. And it's probably gonna and you're probably gonna sell it for exactly what you build it for. Now, of course, people are gonna be like, oh, there's no way you're always gonna lose money. No, I think there's ways that you can build these
Mm-mm.
cars, and you've seen it. You just can't go crazy on some stuff. I mean, there's definitely
That's right.
parts that you can bolt on your car where you're going to get 10 cents on the dollar when you go to sell it. But
Hmm.
there's definitely some good choices out there where you're going to get your money back. I mean, absolutely. Spend $50,000 on a paint job for your car, forget it. Just wash it
Yeah.
down. It's just not going to happen. But
Right.
when you go and say you go to the dealer and you buy a Redeye for, $22,000 or whatever, and a crate harness and an 8-speed and all those things, yeah, you're going to have $30,000 into parts. But I mean, you put that into a nice looking B body. Say you start with a 70 satellite,
Hmm.
that's absolutely, you're going to get every nickel back from that. Now
Yeah.
you start going crazy and putting coilovers and $10,000 worth of wheels on the car and $10,000 worth of brakes. And sure, you're not, but the vast majority of people don't need that, nor do they want that. A lot of people will
Right.
add that on their own. So yeah, it's an interesting
Yeah, I
market. I
know.
mean, it's definitely. I mean, you've seen it, right? I mean, look at all the TV shows that are out there, and I just shake my head, and it's like, you spent how much on what? Okay, more, more power to you. You got the money, go for it. But I've
Yeah.
I've never lived in that world, and I'm probably not going to in my lifetime.
Well, you and me both. And it's interesting. So for those out there, so we're filming an entire series on this that's going to be shown on the upcoming Hemmings YouTube channel. And Kevin is going to be hosting it. He's going to be walking us through why he's doing what we're doing to the car and how the car is getting built and also the trials and tribulations of it, right? Because we know flat out sometimes an idea is going to work, sometimes it's not. And I think one of the biggest things, and we've conveyed this to each other, is being honest with people and saying, listen, you can do it this way. We had some issues with it, but we were able to sort it out by going this direction. And that's something that I think a lot of shows don't do. A lot of shows basically will take you on this journey and you just see parts thrown at a car and then all of a sudden it magically appears and it's done. Right.
Yeah, and that's not what we're gonna do. I mean, yeah, there are failures or there are ideas that you think are gonna work, and working through that should be part of the process. I mean, people build their cars on the internet and forums like that all the time.
Mhm.
Why that hasn't transferred over into video? I mean, obviously there are some videos out there that do a good job, but we absolutely want to show what works and what doesn't. And we're going to talk about why you don't want to do some things that are
Mhm.
generally accepted by the internet, right? I mean, there are just some things you just don't want to do. Um, but we really want to just strive to show that you can do it in your garage. I mean, there's
Mhm.
nothing that we're going to do on your car that will involve a torch, right? We're not going to cut
Right.
some big chunk out of your car. For one reason, I don't own any torches and I don't want any in my shop because it's just a fire hazard and some things I just hate. So, but our short of what we did with my Dart, all the cars that we build are generally, shop floor cars, right? I mean, you take the Challenger that we've run up Pikes Peak, you could absolutely replicate that in your garage. Granted, it has an ACR Viper wing and there's a couple pricey bits on it, but as far as bolting that car together, short of yes, you should have somebody that's knowledgeable put a cage in your car if you're going to race
Mhm.
it. Everything on that car is bolt together. There is nothing custom fabricated, or to the extent that it doesn't just take some simple thought and hand tools to, essentially make it. And that's the way
Y-
your car is going to be put together. There's no reason to reinvent it.
Yeah, I think again that goes back to there was a photograph of the Challenger. We'll dig that up. That was on a track. And it was in front of a Mustang. And it's interesting because the Challenger, Kevin's Challenger, is basically just stock. And there was a couple of people that went on this tirade about, well, it's heavy and it's this and it's that, and it was in front of them. It was leading the Mustang, or whatever the case is. But I think people thought that it was a full-on like tube chassis race car because the car was wrapped, like it was wrapped in
Yeah.
Bilstein livery, and like it looked like a race car. There's no question. But the fact of the matter was, it was literally bolt-on stuff, and that's
Yes.
what people kind of fail to understand. Um, and
What
that's what I
what amazes me is what people really fail to understand what actually happens with their, um, you know, up on a pedestal cars when they show up at the track. It's like,
yeah.
show up at the track with a stock GT500. You've driven it. I've driven it. On that same day that that Challenger is shown in front of that Mustang, which happens to be a GT350 Shelby. It's
Mhm.
not a V6 or whatever the hell people would like to say.
Yeah.
That GT500 would come in, that they were out hot lapping on the same day every 2 laps to get the radiator hose down because it would overheat. And it would heat soak. You know, classic
Right.
LS Corvette stuff, right? I mean, you can't run those cars more than a couple laps. And that's one of the reasons why. I mean, short of the fact that I love Dodge and I love Mopars and clearly it's been a huge part of my life, but it's a huge part of my life because they work. If they didn't work, I would have
Right.
moved on. But
Right.
when you have SRT validation that, yeah, bring your GT500 out to Phoenix in the middle of summer and let's lap it at Bondurant with the rest of the Challengers and see who survives.
Right.
And it's as simple as that. They just work and they last, and you're not throwing parts at them all the time. It's the best bang for the buck you can get.
So I think right there, I think that's really the clear message. And I think for anybody that's listening, if you have questions about upgrading your Challenger, upgrading your Charger, not spending an enormous amount of money, but really just improving it so that you're more comfortable in it, like you need to call Kevin at Wesley Motorsports and talk to him about what he's done to these cars. Because again, I've driven them. They really are fantastic. And I think when you have somebody that's authoritative that really can dispel the myths over what the internet is spouting out, that's a big, big thing, right? The products are proven, raced all the time, bomb proof. It's just been great. So let me ask you this, Kevin. What would you build if you could build anything? Right? I want my Kevin Wesley Ultima build. What would be like? We all have a dream car. What would you build? I'm just super curious about that.
Well, okay, so you have to.
And it doesn't have to be a Dodge. You be anything.
Is it a race car, or is it a street car, or is it a combo car?
It's a combo car.
All right. So if I would build a combo car, and this has been floating around in my head for a while, is I would essentially go to the dealer and I would buy, which I believe actually they're going to make available now. I just saw something again. I saw it pop up on the internet, but I haven't seen anything official. Is I think they're going to let you order a wide body RT scat pack, but not get all the extras, right? Like, I'm cheap. I want to go to the dealer and order a 6-speed RT scat pack wide body, but not have the electronic Bilsteins. Okay. I like Bilsteins, but I'm going to take them off because I want passive. I don't need the 6-piston brakes because I'm going to ditch them for Viper. Right. So I'm going to go and I'm going to order a 6.4, and I'm just going to lighten it up with all the stuff that we've been doing for all of our other cars. And I'm going to put some carbon fiber seats in it, and I'm going to order it with rear seat delete. And I'm going to order it with, a 6-speed, and I'm going to yank the 6-speed, and I'm going to put a dual clutch in that car because dual clutches are cool. And I'm going to take my 6.4 and I'm probably going to go dig it up in aluminum block, and I'm going to make it a 7-liter, but it's still going to be normally aspirated. I'm going to open up the exhaust, but I'm going to make the car weigh 3750 with a dual clutch, and it's going to make 600 horsepower. I mean, come on. How can you beat that? I mean, plus have the size of a Challenger. I mean, running a 325/30 on a lightweight 19-inch wheel, you just can't beat it. And you can build that. That car could be built tomorrow for sure.
Yeah. Okay. See, so basically we're just old school hot rodding right now in the modern world in the 21st century.
Absolutely. And you're still going to end up with a car with absolutely every single street car manner that you would want. Uconnect, Bluetooth, AC, whatever, right?
Mhm.
And it's going to go down the road. And there's nothing in that drivetrain that isn't, again, Stone Axe reliable, right? Because if I go get a DCT out of a whatever BMW that makes 600 horsepower, well, it's going to live behind my 600 horsepower in my Challenger,
Right.
especially when, we're building a lightweight Challenger right now for a new Pikes car. And people talk about, well, how are you going to get durability? You're going to make 1,000 horsepower or whatever it is this week. And it's like, I don't know, I'm going to take 1,000 pounds out of the car. So you take a wheel bearing that's designed for a 4,500 pound car that runs 24 hours continuously. And literally, we've never had a wheel bearing failure, knock on wood, in multiple years of running them. You take 1,000 pounds out of that car, that wheel bearing is going to last like my lifetime and then some. So, when you take these cars that are engineered for that higher weight because they're forced to by whatever, people being cheap or whatever, and you take 500 pounds out of that car, that's that much more durability with most of those driveline parts. Well, it's just like your car. I mean, we're going to leave an 8 3/4 in your car. I guarantee people are like, that 8 3/4 won't live with 800 horsepower.
Right.
You're absolutely right. If we back half your car and put a 1432 on that thing and went and dead hooked at the drag strip, we'd probably scatter its guts all over the place.
Right.
Your car's never going to hook up like that. It's going to boil the tires. I mean, it's not going to have any traction. So it's those simple things that when you really sit there and think about it, what am I truly going to use that car for? But yeah, that would be my car. It'd almost be like building, I've thought about this too, building a Challenger with a Giulia Quadrifoglio driveline, right?
Oh, how cool would that be?
Take the twin turbo V6,
out of that.
Bump it to 550 or whatever they can in Europe, take the ZF 8-speed even, and just bolt it into a Challenger. I mean, how cool would that be? I mean, you would take 100 and probably at least 100 pounds off the nose of that car. So now you take a car for us in a Scat Pack. If you're doing it right, we're 55, 45. You could probably get it down to 52, 48. I mean, on a Challenger, I mean, that's pretty good. So, yeah. I mean,
well,
everything is out there to do what, I would really consider to be an awesome car. But again, when I say, what would be my best car, I'm still being realistic about what I know I can afford, right? I'm not going to say I want a Ferrari, or I'm not going to say I want a new GT3 Porsche.
Right.
I can't write the check for that. So why not be realistic? I mean, listen, I don't even necessarily want a blower car. I mean, I love my Redeye when I drive it on the street, which, literally is for like 2 months before I made it a drag car. But I really love driving my Scat Pack the most. It's as simple as that. I mean, I love the Scat Pack. It's a good package.
Yeah.
But there's ways to take a little bit of weight out of it. And there's, to me, again, I think the DCT is, dual clutch is a little bit cooler than the ZF. The ZF is cool, but it's just, I don't know, it's kind of portly. So I'd rather have a dual clutch.
Well, Kevin, thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for kind of walking us through what we're going to do with the Daytona, what's available, and what Wesley Motorsports is going to do for the, the Charger and the Challenger packages that, if people want to upgrade. But what's the best places that they can find you?
WesleyMotorsports.com. Send us a contact. Kevin at WesleyMotorsports.com. Sales at WesleyMotorsports.com. You can even call us. Probably won't answer the phone because we actually, have to make money sometimes. But, reach out to us on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever. I mean, all the usual methods.
Good. Okay, wonderful. And everyone, keep an eye out on we're going to be announcing when the build series starts. The series itself is going to be called Rebirth, which is kind of fitting because that's what this car is going to be. It's going to have a bunch of episodes in Kevin's shop. Kevin's going to be hosting this. We're going to walk you through what we're doing to this car and why. And then at the end, we've got a pretty cool thing that we're going to do with this thing that we will reveal later on. So again, Kevin, thank you for coming on.
So everybody keeps asking what we're going to do with the extra parts.
Oh yeah.
Can we plan something for the extra parts and call it Afterbirth so we can just put it together?
Yeah, sure. The attorneys are going to love that. Everybody's going to be like, you called it what? Yes, well, that's another thing. We will be doing something, make no mistake, with the original drivetrain and the wheels and the brakes on this car, because
Yeah.
let's face it, they still all work really well. There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
reason to get rid of them.
Yep,
So,
yep.
but that's gonna be something fun. That'll be something fun, and we will promise we will keep you apprised of all that moving forward.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me on. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Be well. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.